Hello everyone, and welcome to Tibetan Buddhist Society of Canberra's regular Sunday morning Dharma talk. Today we will just have the Dharma talk without the meditation, but I'm sure that you as a listener can really do this as a meditation, because it will be very much a subject that is conducive to meditation. So before we begin, as usual, we will do the prayers of refuge, which is a traditional Buddhist prayer. I mean, not all Buddhists do this prayer, but all Buddhists do similar prayer, but some in Pali, others in different languages. So I'm doing in English because a large part of our audience are English speaking. That is refuge, and then refuge in then generation of remembering the importance of altruism, the bodhicitta, and meditating on loving kindness and compassion, joy and equanimity, these four immeasurables. So we'll do that first, and then I'll go straight into the topic of the talk, which is the awareness of the self-grasping, self-addiction particularly. This is talk number 5. So before that we'll do the chanting. Ho-yen-da Buddha-dhamma sangha ajare yedela-dhamma bhavacha ajaya-handala ashare Vada Vajuvebe Endabu Dadarama Zanga Adere Piedaladama Bhavacha Ajyahandala Ajare Vada Vajuvebe and Abu Dadarama Zanga Ajere Piedaladama Bhavaja Ajyahandala Aishare Vada Vajuvebe. May all beings have happiness and a cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness and cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never part from happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell in equanimity, free from attachment, aversion to those near and far. May all beings have happiness, and the cause of happiness. May they be free from suffering, and the cause of suffering. May they never part from the happiness that knows no suffering. May they dwell equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. Okay, we have been continuing this topic of awareness of self-addiction because it's very difficult to have any awareness of self become the really center of our problem, let alone our addiction to it. So we have covered in the first 4 talks in relation to the awareness of self-addiction with one's physical aggregate, one's emotional feelings, and then our actual perception, or how we see, know things, recognition, and then in relation to self-awareness of one's own actions. So how addicted we are to think what we achieved is ours, or what others did are theirs, and we become so unaware of the empty of inherent existence of any of that. And so today we're going to look at the awareness of the self-addiction to consciousness. So consciousness is the last of the 5 aggregates. Its first 4 are relatively easier to recognize or become aware of. And 5th one is consciousness. This is much harder to recognize, let alone become aware of one's addiction to them. So that's why I'm pretty sure when you listen and think carefully, as I will need to think when I speak about the topic, it is going to be topic on the consciousness and how aware are we, what is consciousness, how many types of consciousness there are, and how addictive we are in not knowing it is our own unconscious consciousness, and then we become so persuaded unconsciously to do any of the to do or say or feel or to form opinions, and all the first 4 aggregates we talked about are all connected with the degree of unawareness of our self-addiction to our consciousness. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is our very core of our existence, what we call soul or spirit or life. If we say someone is not alive, we say he's not alive. There's no consciousness. So the consciousness is the aliveness of it. So that shows that there is a aliveness that we each other can read of each other, and maybe subjectively ourselves as well. So that let's try to separate or distinguish the Adventitious Consciousness and the Primordial Consciousness. So let's call the Adventitious Consciousness to the 5 sensorial consciousness: visual consciousness, auditory consciousness, olfactory consciousness, gustatory consciousness, and tactile consciousness. So these are we may call the 5 Adventitious Consciousness, because this visual consciousness for us, for instance, you are seeing not me, but image of me on your screen. And this is adventitious. Adventitious in the sense that it needs to be met with your eye, sense organ, and your consciousness, and wanting to look to the screen rather than things over there, things behind it or things on the side. So when you consciously focus your eye consciousness onto the screen, and then if there is an image, like there is an image, when these 3 meets, advent of this meeting, these 3 together, with the many multitude of many causes and conditions, then there is a conscious of you seeing me. And but of course you're not seeing truly me, but just an image of that manifests on your screen. So that's visual consciousness. That's I call it adventitious visual consciousness. Same goes with the hearing when the sound. The same goes with the olfactory, the smelling, and the same goes with the tasting. And the same goes with the tactile. Now, each of these sense organs themselves is the agent with which the advent of seeing by the eyes or tasting by the tongue or smelling by the nose happens. But smelling by the ears doesn't happen, or seeing by the nose doesn't happen, or tasting by the ear does not happen. So these are adventitious in the sense it has to have the dominant power of the consciousness, mental consciousness, plus the visual consciousness, and then the object, and so on. So this kind of visual consciousness, so this visual consciousness of seeing me, for instance, on your screen, is of course also visual perception. So perception and the aggregate of perception, aggregate of consciousness, aggregate of recognizing you are seeing whatever you're seeing, distinguishable from, and so that's a kind of a recognition, that's perception, and then feeling that you are in the right place or right thing what you're doing and becoming relaxed and happy or whatever this is. So you're feeling as there, as well as your whole visual body, physical body is present. So you can see all the five aggregate are subsumed in the visual consciousness in seeing something. So these are called adventitious consciousness. And what happens is when we are addicted to our visual consciousness, we think what we saw is what exactly it is. So we think become fixated. People say what I saw, because what I saw is largely a figment of my own unconscious, conscious imagination that I'm hearing, or I'm thinking, or I'm feeling, or I'm seeing. But little do we know that that is so, but we think that it truly exists independently of something. We are not aware of our own discursive mental consciousness creating the very kind of perception or recognition or consciousness we have of something. So this is called adventitious consciousness. Adventitious consciousness creates lots of problems insofar as making us believe what we saw is what it is, without realizing how much of the what we see is our own perception, imagination, whether it's colored by any of the afflictions. You actually will see the object not identical to what it is, but identical to our own addiction. But we are not aware of that. We are not aware of that. When a person is person actually wanted to sort of person who is addicted to say the taste of drink, and they're not aware they're addicted to the taste, for instance. They think the thing that are drinking or eating is independently or truly delicious to taste or to drink. One is not conscious of how addicted we are to that recognition and consciousness, in how unconscious we are that drink is actually unhealthy to our liver, to our lung, or to our whatever. We only think it is delicious to the tongue, but it doesn't. It has no awareness whatsoever how harmful it is. What is tasty on the lips is harmful for the hips, for instance. So that shows how unaware we are. We are not aware of how addicted we are to the taste. Taste is, in a gustatory consciousness. We are not gustatory conscious. We are unconsciously. We are unconscious about how addicted we are to the taste of the thing and it is our own mentality and consciousness which believes that the thing is tasty and good for us, but actually it's not good for us. It is bad for many parts of our anatomy. So lots of people are out there who are not conscious eaters or drinkers. Why? They're addicted. They're addicted. They're not aware of the addiction to the taste. They're not aware of the addiction to the flavor. And they're not aware of the harmful consequences that their own liver or their own lung and so on is causing. You can see how many people are obese, how many people's health problems are caused by their own bad eating habits because they are unconsciously placating themselves to enjoy in the taste of sugar or fat or whatever it is, or meat or seafood or whatever it is. Of course, and so temporarily it is enjoyable on the dinner table, but once a person swallows, it goes directly to particular part of our anatomy, and it causes harm. Like we are not aware of that. So you can see, even adventitious consciousness, we are not aware. We are not aware of our addiction to the taste, and that's my cup of coffee, or that's my drink, or that's my food, and one becomes so possessive of a thing as if it is good to oneself. Like people who are smoking are addicted to the flavor. I don't know what is there to for instance, a person who sees who smokes, he is addicted to that. He's deliberately bringing in smoke in his chest and the nose and the mouth, and usually if there is a smoke, people would think it's dangerous. They rather go out somewhere that they don't have to do any inhalation of smoke. But the people who are not aware of the addiction to the I would say to the gustatory consciousness, they're totally unconscious of their gustatory unconsciousness. So and therefore they're addicted to it. And this addictive addiction, addiction to that is what we call addiction to things. So of course it doesn't look like so you can say addiction to things, but it's addiction to the gustatory unconscious consciousness, the taste, the smell, and the flavor, and whatever ambience or whatever it is to which we become so addicted and we are not aware of it. So you can see that is an example of adventitious consciousness, that we are not aware that we are addicted to sensorial object consciousness, sensorial consciousness. We are not visually conscious, let alone we are aware of the addiction that we are visually or auditorily or gustatorily or olfactorily, and of course the sixth mental consciousness. The sixth mental consciousness is addicted to. We are unaware of our thoughts. Our thoughts, our conceptions, our opinions. So we can look at these addicted to, like people who are not getting on with somebody, and even though they're very close friends, it's because they both have very different opinions. And they are allowed to have different opinions, but they don't have to be addicted to the extent of hurting each other's friendship. But yet people are unaware of their addiction to their opinions is hurting their relationship with their father or mother or some close friends. And so they are still very, very addicted and very, very stuck and attached to their opinions. So we can see the addictions or unawareness of the addiction to one's opinions. Most people are hurt by their opinions rather than the things they have opinion about. There is a saying in the Tibetan Buddhist teaching, Nangwe Miching Shenpe Ching, means We are not bound by the appearance, but by attachment to them. And we are not aware that our attachment to them is what we are addicted to. So therefore, your opinion, however unhelpful it is, one is not willing to change one's opinion, and so therefore one is addicted. Of course, if you're addicted to cigarette or drinking or something, then you drink less and you don't smoke, and so one day you might be completely over from drinking and smoking. So, but it's much harder to be aware of the addiction to one's opinions. Yeah, to one's conceptualization, to your political views, and to your religious doctrine, and so on. That's why the Manjushri said in the meditation of young Sachen Konga Nyingbo that out of the four attachments, if you attach to your views, to anything, you have not the correct view. So therefore, thinking that the middle way is the only way, or whatever, or creation story is the only way, this kind of addiction to certain religious doctrinal views is very addictive. This is what causes a division. This is which causes conflict, because one is not able to relax one's opinion or change one's opinion, or at least not push on others and be resentful when others resist. So lots of the kind of narrow-mindedness comes from this unawareness of one's own addiction to one's own political views or any opinions for that matter. So this is related to the addiction and unawareness addiction to consciousness. So now let's look at the consciousness slightly subtly speaking, not just adventitious consciousness of the five sense organs and the sixth mental consciousness. The subtle one is called primordial consciousness. Primordial consciousness, of course, the mind and the nature of the intrinsic nature of the mind and the nature of consciousness is luminosity. Luminosity is the subjective awareness that your mind is very, very fully radiant and aware, but it is so aware of itself that it does not know how to pinpoint to anything within your psychophysical existence, from your longest tip of your hair to the most tiny part of your marrow in the bone. When you look for complete thorough search of everything, there is not an actual physical sign that you can see with eyes or listen with the devices that can actually detect consciousness. This undetectability of this awareness is the consciousness. It's almost, so what is consciousness? The consciousness is luminosity. The luminosity, often our mind is not luminous. Often our mind is very clouded and cluttered and tormented and very confused. But we are not conscious of the confused consciousness or deluded consciousness. So we are not conscious of the deluded consciousness. And that's what, so the addiction, how to become aware of the addiction to the deluded consciousness. And this, of course, is very, very hard, And when I'm right now speaking, I can see how big a subject and subtle an issue, and it is to be able to spot and recognize our consciousness in general, and particularly this primordial luminosity of your consciousness. When people meditate, they are aiming to reach the being able to spot this luminosity of one's mind. This luminosity of mind does not entail focusing on anything that is within the physical domain, but it is therefore metaphysical. Metaphysical means it transcends, it goes beyond the physics, and it is only the domain of the beyond the physics, and yet the mind itself is not beyond physics. It is not yellow, it is not red, it is not male, it is not female, it is not old, it is not young. So consciousness is completely free from any of these designation. None of these designation. It is not even designatable, because you can't. If you see it, you do not have word for it. Therefore, it is indescribable, and it is almost impossible to conceive. So it's inconceivable, the consciousness. So when we talk about the primordial consciousness, so that's a very why most of the time our mind is completely addicted to this deluded consciousness, as if it is clear and rational consciousness. So we are completely hampered by our distraction to the deluded consciousness as a correct consciousness, as non-deluded consciousness. And that's why your opinions with someone and your political views and your fixed views aren't enabling you to move forward, but make you to get stuck in your these fixed views, opinions, however much it is hurting you, however it is making you angry or arrogant or deluded. We are not conscious that it is so. It is very largely done by our unawareness of the addiction to deluded consciousness, as if it is undiluted consciousness. So therefore, Buddhist teachings and the meditation, and even say calm abiding and special insight meditation, is the insight of this consciousness, is this amazing insight that is nothing whatsoever so-called self that is truly and independently and unitarily permanently existing, and let alone anything else that is in the conventional world. Because of failure to understand the emptiness or the luminosity of the consciousness, there is this I and me and mine. So all this addiction to the I and me and mine, we're not aware of that. So we are so deludedly unconscious that we are deluded. And we are very much addicted to it. And this is incessantly happening. It's just like water always falls down, the wind always moves. Likewise, the deluded consciousness always remains deluded. It has the almost very slim chance for itself to be able to become aware. It is not becoming aware of its addiction, of its deludedness. So that's why how to become aware of this addiction to the deluded consciousness. And this is, you have to have lots of merit, of discipline, of study, of contemplation, of self-discipline, of faith in the teachings, and then you start doing this. Once you start to accumulate certain stock of merit or positive energy that actually questions the veracity of our own perception, the volition, the action, the body, and the feelings, and almost now, if there is a consciousness that is not addicted to your deluded consciousness, now it will slowly sort of unpack the emptiness of self in the body or of the body. For instance, likewise, one will see the emptiness of the feeling hurt, or of a feeling hurt that is mine, that is truly existing. We do not see that. These are all misconceived. And then we have fed ourselves with incorrect information as correct informations, and we have been completely misguided and distracted and hijacked by this deluded consciousness. When we become aware of the deluded consciousness, So then we are aware of the deluded consciousness. And so we might have a slight opportunity to dissuade the deluded consciousness from becoming operative consciousness. We have to make the deluded consciousness inoperative. And that possibility exists when you enter in deep, calm abiding and special insight meditation. When you do the special insight meditation, or some meditation called deity yoga, which is ideally is emptiness yoga. It is just the emptiness of self is replaced by the deity, who is also actually emptiness. So when you become very, very conscious, good at doing such a meditation, you become very cognizant of the very easy impulse to develop deluded consciousness. When there is a consciousness that spots and identifies deluded consciousness, then it is not deluded consciousness. So how often can we become aware of the addiction of the deluded consciousness? That frequency that your mind can be aware is whenever you are present, whenever you are mindful of your own conscious thoughts and your perception, your volition, your feelings, and so on. And then you can see that the mind could now go beyond the visual domain of the world or auditory domain of the world, and it can become now conscious of the actual mental consciousness. When you become aware of the mental consciousness, there is a likelihood of becoming separating the mental consciousness from visual consciousness. So visually, you may, whatever you see, you can see that what you see is colored by your own desire or hate or whatever the kind of dominant emotion it is, afflictive emotion it is, that is actually obscuring your perception of things. Even undesirable looks desirable when you are addicted to the flavor or to the form or whatever, or you're biased or whatever. But you can see how your bias towards something or how your attachment to something makes the object look and appear much appealing than actually it is. So you become conscious of how deluded consciousness obscures the visual and auditory consciousness, and therefore see unpleasant things pleasant, impermanent things permanent, and unsatisfactory things as satisfactory. And even kind people, we don't see the kindness of them, we see the aggressive or possessive or controlling. So you can see we are not conscious of that usually. We think it's them. We think it's the object. We are seldom aware that it is our mental or visual consciousness that is obscuring us from seeing the facts for what it is. We're not aware of that. So we are so unaware. So because first we have to become aware of the unawareness. How easy it is to become so unaware. That's why I deliberately try to choose a time and space and the teaching with which we try to use in order to sit still and then become cognizant of what to focus your attention to, such as breathing in or breathing out or keeping your body still. Whatever it is, when you become very, very conscious of that, you can see how the physical, tactile body and visual consciousness and all this other five sort of sensory consciousnesses always usually the kind of adventitious, afflictive, dominant, and persuasive consciousnesses. The sixth sense of mental consciousness is often enslaved by the other dominant five sensory consciousness. And but when you become much more significantly, I would say, taught and well read and well heard, then you know that how most of our perceptions are deluded perceptions. Therefore, not only deluded but impure projections of our own deluded mind. And hence you have a hesitation to see the object as desirable, even you do desire them. And so you have self-control in not sort of indulging in them, but seeing the unnecessity of that craving to operative. Because of that, you can pause for the cause of not becoming indulged in the olfactory or gustatory or visual consciousness. Because your mental consciousness has a little bit more say than to the eye consciousness or any other sensory adventitious consciousness. So this becomes when you have the ability to distinguish, the ability for the sixth sense, the mental consciousness, become sensible, and make the sense powers of the visual and other sensory consciousness to hasten them to hesitate them from delving and diving into the sensory objects so much. Because of that, there is greater self-control and no agitation and frustration. Because it is the self-control, if it is the awareness of one's own sensory consciousness, the adventitious consciousness are now somewhat slightly influenced and persuadable by the sixth sense mental consciousness. If you are not aware of this danger of the addictive behavior lurking into other way, you could not know where it should be directed to, away from what the opposite. So these kinds of cognitive awareness, metacognitive awareness, definitely is, you're not looking at things so much, but you are more looking at your own sensorial consciousness and how much of the mental consciousness has a say in terms of how the adventitious consciousness of the eyes and ears and nose, you could see something, but you're not attached to them, you're not holding with the wrong view. Why? Your mental consciousness basically have the good grip to dissuade it. Now, if you're conscious of doing that, then we can see that addictive consciousness, of which we have now become aware, is not truly and permanently inherently existing. So there is no such thing as addiction that is permanent and that could not be terminated. Because everything that is created, which is addiction, is also created. Addiction is not some truly existing thing. Addiction is learned. It was picked up sometime, but it was never there before. So therefore, we should not be too worried about the addiction, but more concerned about the need to become aware of them and learning how to put a mechanism to prevent the unconscious consciousness from operating as it usually normally does. So if you're doing regular meditation, that's exactly what you're doing. If you're reading, if you're studying Dharma, and if you're meditating, you become much more subjectively aware of your own mind, and how do you know that you are now become a little bit more aware of your addictive consciousness? You become a lot more light and bright and therefore clear and sharp. And your mind is very serene, and therefore the nature of the mind is not in the mind, but nature of the mind is merely luminosity. Yeah. So the luminosity or clarity, subjective clarity of mind actually makes all your senses become much more wakeful, visually, auditorily, and so on. You can hear things, but what you're hearing things is just habituated phonemes of a language. Otherwise, there is nothing inherently in the sound that I say or somebody say that is hurtful, that is harmful to us, except that we are hearing this phoneme in a conceptual conceptually invented meaning of the words and sound and meanings. But there is no ultimately any sound that is cause of delight or cause of harm, because they're all just wind, just the wind, So that's why there is no sound that truly inherently exists. If you are conscious, if you are very, very conscious that your auditory consciousness is not subject to become upset by what you hear, because all what you hear is just wind, and And if you are not a speaker of that language, because you're not habituated, because you're not conditioned to, and therefore there's nothing what I say, what somebody say will hurt, upset to you. Why? Because you're conscious. You're conscious of your auditory consciousness being just merely relative. And this relativeness of your auditory consciousness is understood by the mental consciousness. When your mental consciousness is very, very present, it is much more alert and sharp and less vulnerable and offendable by anything what it hears, because it hears nothing. It is here nothing that is truly independently existing, permanently harmful thing. And so that's why people who meditate and who are particularly deity yoga practitioner, they're told that whatever you hear, all sound is mantras. All sound is just vowels and consonants, and vowels and consonant doesn't really hurt anybody. And so only when you condition yourself to say, if this word, this means this, and you get really stuck in it, you're not conscious. They're just merely invented. They're just merely imputed by us linguists and people in our forefathers invented those words, and we're subscribing to. But in reality, there is nothing really in the sound that can hurt you. There is no sound, it says in the Heart Sutra. If you're conscious, then you can say there's no. It doesn't mean there's no sound. There's no sound that inherently, that is independently, that truly exists from its own side. That's what it means. So when you know the sound doesn't exist from its own side, then you are telling your ear consciousness that it is largely to do with your hearing consciousness, being switched on, being heedful to the sound. But if you do not pay attention to the sound itself is just a background noise. You will be focusing on something else instead. So if you're reading a paper or something, even you hear right in front of people speaking, you don't hear them because you're so focused on what you're reading. So sound doesn't dominate. Sound doesn't dominate your consciousness because you're not addicted to that. Your mind is a little bit more sparingly directed to focus elsewhere. So, yet we are not aware of these things. We become so addicted to what he said, what she said, and what you heard people said, what someone did, and all these are jumbled up incorrect informations. And they are only relatively true on a relative level, but ultimately they are all completely confusion. And so we are not conscious of that. When you are addicted to that, you get hurt very easily. When you're not addicted, and you're aware of the addiction, and not therefore hold them to be truly existing form, sound, smell. There's no form, there's no smell, there's no taste. That's exactly the teaching saying. If you're conscious, if you're not addicted, you're aware of how to avoid that addictive behavior of consciousness, then you become luminously clear. You can see the emptiness of all things, whatever you hear, whatever you see, even those you touch. These are all interdependently originated, but otherwise they do not exist, they do not remain, they do not last. Some things exist, but nothing lasts. So that's why when you're unconscious, it appears that there exists a problem. But when you're conscious and you're not addicted to what you thought it was, and you are no longer able to, no longer subjected to be enslaved by the addictive unawareness, now we are exactly aware of the addiction. And we are conscious of the addictive behavior. We are so grasping with things as if it is always the case, which is not. These kind of cognitive awareness, when we have, so you become now aware of how to stay aware. When you are able to become very aware, then you experience totally different perception and volition and consciousness. Your consciousness is very, very primordially pure, And you could not stain the sky, for instance. You can splash the whole bucket full of kind of enamel color or something. You can just splash in the sky, and not a single drop falls in any of the sky. Likewise, your mind is so spaciously vast and infinite and unbounded, like the space. So your mind is spacious, and consciousness that is infinite. Your mind that is infinite, and that's what they call infinite consciousness. They say infinite space, infinite nothingness. This is what meditators, advanced meditator, will experience the infinity of consciousness, infinity means no finiteness of self, no finiteness of the mind or a person to be found. Like nobody can find any of us if they look inside the body, But if they just say, who is this? Is this a dog? Is this a human being? Maybe dog could be distinguished from human. Human could be distinguished from male, from female. But that's about it. But actual consciousness of any of these creatures is not visible to anyone who can. Nobody can spot or listen or trace consciousness. Unless those people who are very, very advanced, they can sense the consciousness. Of course, they know the consciousness is infinite because there are so many beings most of the beings who are in this world are invisible. And what are invisible? They are all invisible consciousness, invisible souls. And these souls are what we call a primordial consciousness is the pure, ultimately pure consciousness. And so the practice of mindfulness and meditation is to give us a handle how to direct our mind to become aware of not becoming addicted, and to become aware of the addicted when it is addicted, and therefore take caution. And then when we become aware of the addicted mind to self and my consciousness, you say, oh, I think this, I'm so tired. And one believes I'm tired. One believes I'm not cherished, or I'm not valued. And when we think like that, we're consciously saying I'm not cherished, even though we should be the first one who should cherish and say thank you. But we are not able to do that. We are not able to thank ourselves. We're not able to encourage ourselves positively. But we are so good at deliberately discouraging ourselves, always blaming ourselves, and almost bashing ourselves, belting ourselves. We're so addicted to the self-punishment, self kind of a criticism. This shows this is the addiction to the unconscious of being so harmful, so negative towards oneself. And that manifests in outwardly to many things. So that's why it's important to be conscious that this is happening. And when you know it's happening, you can, oh, how come I am doing this myself, So we become almost rebellious in learning not to do that, consciously not to do that, and instead claim that you are light, that you are good, that you have a capacity to be good and to think lightly and wisely and compassionately. Then you become very conscious that this kind of transformative consciousness, meditative consciousness, lift yourself up and therefore lift your spirit up, and therefore you do not feel heavy and dense and tense. Because consciousness is not dense and tense. Consciousness is light and entityless. So entitylessness and consciousness of the consciousness should be experienced. Therefore, the meditation greatly empowers the people to actually experience consciousness. When you experience consciousness, you don't suffer nearly the same physically, emotionally, let alone perceptually. You don't, because you do not see their true existence. You're so conscious that these two are also a reflection of your varying degrees of consciousness that are deluded or partially deluded or recognized deluded or whatever it is. Recognized delusion does not precipitate. Recognized delusion becomes very quickly dissuaded from becoming deluded. So you can see, you can shorten the duration of your undeludedness, or you can prevent the chance of you becoming deluded again. So there's a lot of advantages in becoming aware of the self-addiction to one's consciousness, whether it's a visual or all the way to tactile or mental or opinions. So therefore, you will have this amazing sense of spaciousness that you see everyone and anything, in spite of their conventional difference, they're all Buddhas. They're all awakening beings in being able to know their infinite love or compassion to all. So you can see the universal, the primordial consciousness is experience. So these primordial consciousness is only experienced for majority of people only at the moment of death, moment when all these gross sense faculties dies, and then only the subtle mental consciousness experience its infinity of luminosity. But we don't have to wait until the death luminosity. We can train the child luminosity. So therefore, when you become aware of the consciousness, your consciousness will inform you that you are light and you are infinite and you are not a fixed person. You're not one finite person who's infinite. You don't have sense of I. It is not I or me or mine. It transcends all of those fixations and boundaries. It is unbounded. When you become aware of that, that's probably what the aim of most meditation is. Most aims of meditation is try to transcend your ordinary material, physical bodiness and go in the pure meditative consciousness. There the person actually experiences bliss and emptiness, clarity, emptiness, awareness and emptiness, sound, sound and emptiness, and so you can actually experience all of that, because when you're not adventitiously conscious of the worldly being, but you're actually primordially conscious of the nature of the consciousness itself, which is timeless, which is not old, young, because its consciousness is not produced. So consciousness is indescribable. That's what meditators try to stay quiet, because it is indescribable. It is unthinkable. And I'm not saying what today to you, anything really. How could I ever talk about consciousness? But I can only talk about addictive consciousness. That's why I'm talking about the actual consciousness that is we are fully aware and not addictive, does not need to be spoken, thought about. But there is something indescribable that happens when you are able to be aware of the addictive consciousness and then successfully being able to dissuade it. So that is completely possible. So that's why meditation offers an infinite opportunity to people to experience the primordial consciousness and withdraw from the adventitious sensory consciousness, go somewhere quiet, place or time that is really best for you to exercise restraint from interactive operative consciousness with adventitious consciousness, and slowly enter into deep infinite consciousness. So that's the talk today. Thank you very much for everybody joining me and know me. And thank you very much. And whatever little merit there is from here, I'm sure it will benefit everyone. We do the dedication merit. Deje, Kareje, Manju, Shrenyavade, Azama, Draba, Drarela, Walawe, Avade, Zamba, Ajade, Degade, Mere, Meda, Sala, Bodhijada, Treba, Verana, Yadanza, where has been Bomayadang, freely with the generation. Thank you, everyone.